Much is being done on nuclear explosives with so little radioactivity that excavation projects will be possible with no off-site radiation problem.
In North America, suggestions were made, like digging a tunnel under New York City, or melting oil out of the Athabasca tar sands. Could a few blasts send a rocket into outer space? Could the smog over Los Angeles be dispersed by the heat from a 10-megaton fireball?
We can make these nuclear explosions cleaner and cleaner. And I think the time is not far off where we can hope to have nuclear explosives completely clean.
Unleashing the power of the sun inside the Earth left
explosives has shown that as a nuclear explosion is buried deeper and deeper, crater size steadily increases until a depth of burst is reached, for which crater dimensions are maximum. Below this depth, crater size decreases. Also, as the explosion is buried deeper and deeper, the fraction of the radioactivity released to the atmosphere becomes less and less. Thus, it is possible to choose a depth of burst that will give almost maximum crater size with the release of only a few percent of the radioactivity. Using these concepts, the depth of burst chosen for Sedan was 635 feet. The predicted crater diameter ranged from 1,200 to 1,500 feet, and the depth from 180 to 315 feet. The release of radioactivity was expected to be less than 4%. The explosive used for Sedan was a 100 kiloton thermonuclear device in which less than 30% of the total energy came from fission. Since only a few percent of this fission fraction escaped to the atmosphere, less than 2 kilotons of radioactivity was released by Sedan. The site of Sedan was the Atomic Energy Commission's Nevada test site, located in southern Nevada, 70 miles northwest of Las Vegas. The specific location chosen for Sedan was at the north end of Yucca Valley, near the site of 2 earlier nuclear cratering detonations and much high explosive cratering work. Sedan was detonated at 10 a.m., July 6, 1962. This is a view taken from the top of a 1,500-foot tower located 6 miles from ground zero. These sequences are being shown at about 1/3 normal speed. The base surge, seen forming here, continued to grow until it covered an area about 5 miles in diameter. The main cloud rose to a height of 12,000 feet above.
Get ready.
Kick.
Yes, kick. Get ready.
Steal.
Yes, steal. Get ready.
Plane.
Yes, plane.
First thing that I want to make clear is that I'm stuck on the 86th floor. A fire door has trapped us, debris has fallen around us, and part of the core of the building is blown out.
How many people are with you, Jim?
I'm with one other person, and I'm...
Get ready.
Kick.
Yes, kick. Get ready.
Steal.
Yes, steal. Get ready.
Plane.
Yes, plane. Get ready.
Kick.
Yes, kick. Get ready.
Steal.
Yes, steal. Get ready.
Plane.
Yes, plane.
We have an enormous explosion now in the remaining World Trade Tower Center.
Look out!
if I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car.
The people that went over there to clean after the collapse of the towers, and they have died, 160 of them. All the rescue dogs are dead. And over 60,000 people in the area of New York and New Jersey are sick because of the toxic dust that was generated when the towers collapsed.
I ran out of the building. Already out of the building, about 15 steps. And I felt the flame that's coming out from the building.
I saw an individual coming down that was clearly, he was completely burned from head to toe, and all of his skin had come off his forearms and his face, and his hair was all gone, and looked a little disoriented, so he seemed to be on his cell phone, either talking to somebody or trying to reach somebody, and I asked him what happened. What was amazing about his story was that he was in the lobby of World Trade Center 1 when the first plane hit. And when the debris started coming down, he went back to go into the building to protect himself and was in the revolving doors going back in off West Street when he looked up and a fireball came flying out, I guess from the elevator shafts, that's what he seemed to believe, and blew out all the windows and threw him back onto the street, and obviously, you know, in a fire flash, seared all his skin. But apparently nothing, you know, all his clothes, none of his clothes were burned. So that was pretty amazing, and he was shaking, and it was clear that he needed to get to a hospital.
So a piece of glass cut my tendon, and you know, the frame, the blaze coming out like a big fireball. And yeah, they swept through my body from pole.
I was down in the basement, came down, all of a sudden the elevator blew up, smoke. I dragged the guy out, his skin was hanging off, and I dragged him out, and I helped him out to the ambulance.
When this huge explosion happened, that pushed us upwards in the air, an indication that something very powerful exploded below us. And at that moment, when I went to say it, we hear, pa! The impact and the explosion of the plane on the top. Two different events separated by 7 seconds, more or less.
I got 20 blocks away when the smell and the taste really hit me. Way in the distance, the huge cloud on the horizon, but I could taste and smell something that was like the worst electrical fire ever imaginable.
The concrete floors, the furniture, the computers, and the file cabinets weren't the only things missing after the collapses. The Twin Towers were also filled with people. Inexplicably, though, almost half of the victims' bodies seem to have disappeared into thin air. When a building collapses, the victims tend to remain trapped between the pancaking floors. They may be crushed and mangled, but in most cases they remain in one piece. In fact, on the morning of September 11, local hospitals prepared to receive hundreds of victims they expected to be extracted from the rubble. Practically no one arrived. According to the chief medical examiner, 2,749 victims died in the Twin Towers, but fewer than 300 whole bodies were recovered. Nearly 20,000 pieces of bodies were found in the ruins, more than 6,000 small enough to fit in 5-inch test tubes. 200 different pieces were matched to a single person. 1,630 victims were eventually identified, 800 of which by DNA alone. This means that for 800 victims, there were no body parts large enough to be recognizable. The remaining 1,119 victims were never identified. This means that for more than 40% of the victims, not even a fragment large enough to recover DNA was found.
For Joyce and Russell Mercer, there's no trace of the son they lost on 9/11, firefighter Scott Kopitko.
You can't go to a cemetery, can't put flowers down.
Personally, I lost a cousin in the building and never found his remains.
It was on the 100th floor of Tower 1, and they never found anything or any remnants.
Tricia Riley recovered her sister Lorraine's handbag, but nothing of her body.
Lorraine has a tombstone at the cemetery, but she isn't there.
1,100 victims completely unaccounted for. In other words, no pieces large enough to gain any DNA from, vaporized. Can fire and a gravitational collapse account for this massive pulverization of people?
This map by the New York Fire Department shows the locations around the towers where human remains were found. Yellow circles are body parts from civilians. Red triangles are from firefighters. The very distance at which some of the body parts were found remains inexplicable with a simple gravitational collapse. In fact, fragments of human remains continued to emerge from Ground Zero for many years after the attacks.
Human remains were found at the World Trade Center site on Wednesday. Crews made the discovery at 11 Water Street. Another 4 possible remains were found at the Whole Road excavation site.
The ME is also investigating other remains that were found about 2 weeks ago on the roof of 90 West Street.
Construction workers found 9 pieces of bone and tissue on a 20th floor scaffolding on this building on West Street.
Workers have found 65 potential human remains at the World Trade Center site over the last couple of days. The medical examiner's office says they were recovered from the Liberty Street section of the site.
Then, in 2006, came the biggest surprise.
Demolition workers found 74 new bone fragments on the roof of the Deutsche Bank building over the weekend. That's the most found since the end of major recovery operations at the site.
The number of fragments found on the roof of the Deutsche Bank kept increasing by the day.
Crews continue to find human bone fragments on the roof of the Deutsche Bank building next to the Trade Center site. The medical examiner's office says 142 fragments were found, bringing to 598 the total number of fragments found in the building.
Eventually, more than 700 bone fragments were recovered from the Deutsche Bank building. USA Today wrote, "The bone fragments are tiny, some the size of a pinky nail." Some debunkers have suggested that the bone fragments could have reached the roof of the Deutsche Bank after the impact of American 11, as some debris exited the opposite side of the tower in a southerly direction. But the view of the Deutsche Bank was blocked by the South Tower at the time of impact, and there was no direct line between the exit hole in the North Tower and the roof of the Deutsche Bank. Furthermore, as seen in this map, the body parts found on the roof belong not only to civilians, but also to firefighters, who were clearly not present in the North Tower at the time of impact. Question: can you explain how a simple gravitational collapse, where the bodies remain trapped between pancaking floors, could have produced more than 20,000 body parts out of 2,700 victims, while more than 1,100 bodies left no fragments large enough to extract a DNA sample? Can you explain how a simple gravitational collapse could have produced the bone fragments and body parts from civilians and firefighters that were recovered from the roof of the Deutsche Bank building?
So atomic demolition munitions.
This weapon, what is it exactly?
It's a miniature atomic bomb. That's what it is.
Yeah, well, that's essentially correct. Small, clean nuclear device.
What about radiation fallout?
Oh, 60 feet, minimal.
There is a class of weapon type called ADM, atomic demolition munitions. These munitions were implanted just like a landmine.
The Army and the Marines chose to use a 3-digit coded lock. Well, that also required someone to come up to the weapon to unlock it. And Sandia was asked to develop an electrical switch.
A pattern-controlled switch that could be installed in the ADM and then operated from a distance.
Infidel defilers shall all drown in lakes of blood. Now they will know why they are afraid of the dark. Now they will learn why they fear the night.
than letting them open up and respond to the situation that tomorrow may be the only day on which the various exchanges are closed. That remains to be questioned and analyzed all around the world this evening, Matt.
And of course, we've heard that the markets here in this country were closed today. We've been told they'll be closed again tomorrow. I mean, how long can we expect them to be shut down until they can get up and running again?
Well, there are so many sensitive issues to be dealt with, not the least of which will be security for the participants in those marketplaces downtown, the New York Stock Exchange being the principal exchange in Lower Manhattan. It is likely, one would assume, that because of the worry that disrupting the financial markets could be worse than letting them open up and respond to the situation, that tomorrow may be the only day on which the various exchanges are closed. That than letting them open up and respond to the situation, that tomorrow may be the only day on which the various exchanges are closed. That remains to be...
Was literally sheaved off, and it took probably about another 30 seconds before the skeleton collapsed into the street. That was the last we saw of the World Trade Center, and that was maybe 10 minutes ago when that final skeleton, the metal skeleton, steel skeleton, collapsed into the street.
That was NBC's Pat Dawson again. He's standing about 10 blocks from where the World Trade Center towers used to stand.
30 seconds before the skeleton collapsed into the street. That was the last we saw of the World Trade Center, and that was maybe 10 minutes ago when that final skeleton, the metal skeleton, steel skeleton, collapsed in.
They intended it to be exactly like this.
Okay, that's what they intended. What actually happened?
What actually happened? Okay, I will try to explain to you. As you remember, I explained to you before that not only the underground cavity would be created, but it would be surrounded by the crushed zone, which will be filled with a pulverized material, and the damaged zone. So I have another drawing, it is also from my book, that the demolition idea actually looked like this. The tower goes under surface 27 meters, and another 50 meters was the position of nuclear charge, the zero box. And the after cavity will look like this, after the explosion 100 meters. So the tower supposed just to disappear into the cavity.
Yes.
Okay. But as you remember, when I explained to you in the previous drawing about the underground nuclear explosion 500 meters deep,
yes,
all those zones, they were more or less concentric.
Yes.
The cavity, the crushed zone, and the damaged zone. Because the pressure from every direction, when the charge is buried sufficiently deep, is the same. I mean, the resistance of materials from every direction is the same.
Yes.
So the expansion of all these rings will be almost the same to every direction. But if we position the nuclear charge closer to the Earth's surface, not the 500 meters, are just like 50 meters or 77 meters, this cavity will not look like this. They will look more elliptic with a longer end facing upwards. So the cavity will be of this form, and the crushed zone will be the same. It will look more or less like an egg with the sharper end facing upwards.
I understand.
Why it happens? Because the resistance of materials towards the Earth's surface is the least. And everything always goes by the way of the least resistance.
Oh, so if it's going through, that pressure is going through the foundations, then it reaches a floor, then it reaches a carpet, then it reaches a desk, and there's nothing like solid granite that it's pushing against.
No, as you see, here I made the cavity of the round form, but that is in the ideal case, but nothing is ideal in reality. So if the tower is like this, and the nuclear charge is positioned here, it would not produce exactly round cavity. It will produce cavity of this form.
Okay.
And the crushed and damaged zone, they will be also like this. Because they will tend to expand by the way of least resistance towards the Earth's surface, rather than to these directions. Because here the resistance of materials is much stronger than this way. So it's just pure physics. And the other thing that you have to consider, that granite around here is more or less solid and strong material, while the tower is half empty. And even though it is steel, but it provides different resistance of material compared to granite. That's why the expansion by the tower structure of these zones will be much longer than it underground case.
So if it's only 77 meters below the surface, wouldn't we hear an enormous explosion?
No, you would not.
What would we hear?
Nothing. You will just feel the shaking of the earth, which is typical for underground nuclear explosions.
Like a train going underneath?
Can be compared. It would be... You can measure it by the Richter scale. 150 kiloton will produce something like maybe 5.7 by Richter scale. It's enough to
So
feel.
when the fire chief, when the fireman testified when he left the Marriott Center and felt the ground shaking,
Yes.
and then looked up and the South Tower was coming down.
Yes, that is very reasonable explanation, because you know this expansion of these zones towards the tower structure took a few seconds, because once the nuclear explosion happens, at this time the earth was shook like earthquake, and then the pressure of gases begin to expand the cavity and to create these zones which will continue by the tower structure. And between the actual shaking and this process will be a few seconds. I guess it was 12 seconds, as you can see in the movie. We have one movie. Look at this one. This is one of the rarest movie that contemporary. You can see that the tower begins suddenly to shake.
Yes.
And you can see it in this. And then you can measure, you can count 12 seconds and the tower started to come down.
So it takes 12 seconds for what to happen?
For these 12 seconds, the pulverization wave was propagated towards the tower, towards the
pulverization.
Yes.
That means the pressure causing a crash zone?
Okay, I explained to you. You see, let's say this is our tower. And this is the Earth's surface. Our nuclear charge is here. The first, it will create a primary size of the cavity. In result, it will be because of the disappearance of the rock. It will be evaporated. And then the pressure of the gases, which is a former rock, will try to expand the cavity. So it will expand the cavity a little bit. And then the next area will be already compressed by this process. So it will create the three zones. The outer one is a damaged zone. This is the border of damaged zone. And this is the border of crushed zone. And this is the border of the cavity. And all of them will expand. mostly to this direction. So before the foundation of the tower will be reached by the border of expanding cavity, it will be first reached by the border of the damaged zone, which will continue to propagate upwards until it reaches some maybe 350 meters. Okay? And then it will be followed by the border of the crushed zone, which will continue the same way until it reaches maybe 300 meters. And only then it will be reached by the end of the expanding cavity. So in this process, as you can see, the first tower will be damaged into small pieces until 350 meters. And immediately it will be also pulverized up to 300 meters. So this will be dust, complete microscopic dust.
So the
very
tower,
typical
the
for the crushed
steel,
zone.
the computers, the desks, the chairs, the
Even
carpet.
the human beings.
Dust.
Everything will be just transformed to complete microscopic dust. And this area will be damaged into small debris. And because the tower was above 400 meters, this part will be still undamaged, means solid and heavy. So by the gravitational forces, it will, in the next second, it will just press down.
The vapors coming from the ground. They were seen from space, and in fact identified.
You're talking about?
I'm talking about the shots from oversaw that saw these vapors for some time. And you observe in your book that they're not black smoke.
No,
they're
because
white.
it's not smoke, it's a vapor.
Right.
It's white.
You also observe hotspots in precisely the three places where you say nuclear devices were activated. One under WT7, yes, we have it.
But this is not my observation. I just found it published on the internet by someone else, and I thought that yes, the hotspots, as you see, they exactly correspond with the position of nuclear devices.
And in fact, they record temperatures way exceeding the temperatures created by burning kerosene weeks afterwards.
Yes.
And your position is that there's no other explanation for those hotspots being where they are.
You cannot create such a high temperature, 100 meters below the ground, that could sustain itself for a few months, unless you use a thermonuclear explosion of over 100 kilotons. What else it could be? Where you can get such a big energy to sustain these temperatures for such a long time?
In fact, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I have here the 9/11 Ground Zero Energy Report. And this was recently published, but it does actually reach the conclusion, interestingly, the same as you. And I'll quote from it. The huge vertical particle plumes briefly left behind where the towers had stood moments earlier offer mute testimony to the fact that solid floors did not sequentially pancake downwards. That would have taken significantly longer, been far less destructive, and appeared far different from what was observed. Clearly, this hypothesis that a sequenced vertical array of directional low-yield thermonuclear devices was used to annihilate the World Trade Center skyscrapers top to bottom, forgive me. It's not an easy thing to prove. It should be easy to disprove if it's significantly off base. Yet it remains standing as the basis for the only explanation to account for all the most phenomenal ground zero evidence. So here we have some physicists agreeing with you.
Yes.
And we have a groundswell of sites coming up saying 9/11 truth, loose change, other experts, doctors of physics coming forward and saying there's something wrong here. And each of those is heading towards the conclusion that you draw in your book. That must give you some comfort.
I don't even know how to answer this.
If the evidence if the evidence were unsupported by anybody or anything else, and you just published this book and announced to the world, I know what happened and I know who did it, they would laugh at you if nobody had drawn the conclusions that you've drawn, that the 9/11 Commission report is wrong, doesn't address and answer questions that you've answered, and other people are reaching the same conclusions.
Yes, of course. There are a lot of people who attempted to search for September 11 truth independently, and they arrived to similar conclusions as mine, with the one difference. They did not know for sure that there was a nuclear demolition scheme of the World Trade Center, while I knew it for sure from my former service in the Soviet military. That makes the difference. So it means they were guessing, and they arrived to the same point. But I didn't need to guess, I know it for sure.
But there's something else that makes your book unique. And we'll come to that later, but that is that you are going to name the perpetrators of the 9/11 tragedy.
Yes.
Thank you.
To help us get our mind around the phenomena at the World Trade Center, Dr. Judy Wood begins by reminding us how much structure was there.
We have two towers, huge towers, very large objects once upon a time. Let's look at how they're built. The core columns, huge beefy beams. And then we have the outer columns and floors bolted between the two. These floors are pretty elaborate structures with this webbing of trusses underneath. Can you imagine putting your arms around one of these beams? It's pretty large. I look at this picture and wonder how someone could believe that every single piece of cross-section would disintegrate at the same time, due to heat, due to whatever. And as they're building it, you can see the very substantial core columns. Looks like it's half the floor space. And then they went away. So here we have WTC-3, also known as the Marriott Hotel. Right after WTC-2 was destroyed, had this big gouge out of it. Vertical slice separating the southernmost edge of it. This was before Tower 1 was destroyed, and when Tower 1 was destroyed, the rest of this building went away. And we have these 3 wheat checks stabbed into the pavement. And here is what's left. This little tiny stub looked like it was the base of this tall, narrow portion. Just a little tiny bit of it left. This is looking north-northeast, across where Tower 1 used to stand an hour or two earlier. Where did it go? From this down to here's a top view of the site. Building 4, you don't have the main body of it, you just have the north wing. Where did it go? Where are the towers? Bankers Trust is 40 stories, so we're missing 60 or 70 stories of building, more than half of it. Where to go? Where are the towers? Where are the towers? Where to go? Tower 1 is so overshadowed by this 8-story remnants of Building 6. What's wrong with this picture? You should have at least 100 more stories of the north wall of Tower 1. Where is the north wall? Where to go? Where to go? Where are the towers? How much energy did it take? Well, let's look at some pattern recognition here. We have Mount St. Helens. We have a nuclear test in Nevada. And we have one of the WTC buildings coming apart. To me, they look similar. Probably a similar amount of energy was involved. This is Hiroshima. A few days before Hiroshima, would anyone have imagined this? Just everything gone.
Dr. Wood documented phenomena so unusual, she had to coin new terms like dustification.
So what about the dust? There was a lot of dust. As it happens, here is Tower 1 and Tower 2. A large portion of it filled New York, filled the air, went everywhere. And it looks pretty uniform in size, except for the paper. Landed on the fruit. It's like a fresh snow. Here's a view from the north. What covered the wheat checks was aluminum cladding, which you can see those pieces falling off, but they don't trail dust. But the steel wheat checks trail dust. This is an interesting. This is a rather large wheat checks falling here with dust shooting out behind it. Is the building just turning to dust? Why? This is Tower 2, closer to the ground. Do you see any solid pieces of building coming down? I don't. I see aluminum cladding falling, but the rest is this type of dust that seems to trail behind the wheat checks. And then we have dust everywhere. This Cushman scooter kicks up dust that just stays in the air. If you drive down a dirt road, your pickup truck is going to kick up dust, but it pretty quickly settles out. This does not settle out like that.
The reason the dust stays in the air is because of the ultra-fine particle size, below 1/4 of a micron in diameter. Thomas Cahill of the University of Davis, California, studied the particle size distribution of the minerals in the fumes. Typical mechanical crushing creates coarse and fine particles. Very fine and ultrafine particles are essentially non-existent. The graph heads to zero and stays there. Now look at what was measured at ground zero. There is an extraordinary presence of ultrafine particles. This is conclusive proof that molecular dissociation took place. Cahill did not count particles less than 0.09 microns. Is this because he was afraid of what he knew he would find?
Here are 4 consecutive shots, and you can see these columns just turn to dust. Here's a video clip, and you can watch this turn to dust. So is this what happened to the entire building? Perhaps. Let's look at it a little bit more carefully. These core columns that were left standing for whatever reason are strong and rigid. That's a very tall, unsupported column. And the next frame, it starts to tip, and then it turns to dust before it even tips over. And as this dust cloud rolls out, it's very energetic. It looks like it's boiling. It's expanding in all directions. Tremendous amount of dust.
The behavior of the dust clouds greatly resembled a phenomenon seen in volcanic eruptions.
Known as a pyroclastic flow, this eruption of 1,500-degree gas and rock speeds down the mountain.
The disintegration of the buildings was not the only bizarre 9/11 mystery. We have holes.
So let's look at those holes. If you look at the scale, using these wheat checks here, because we know about what the spacing is on them, you can figure out these are about 24-foot diameter holes, or cylindrical cutouts. Many of them the same diameter. Look how far down the middle of that hole is. It's empty down to the ground level. 8 stories of building, gone. This is a look from inside that hole. You count down from the top, you can count down 8 stories. So you know you're at ground level. Then we have building 5 that was over in the northeast corner. Nice round cylindrical holes. This one turns out there's a roof flap hanging over it, but it's still the cylindrical cutout. This one looks like a larger diameter. But what caused those round holes? We have this cylindrical cutout in the middle of Liberty Street. You notice this outer wall is sort of leaning back, and it's got a cutout missing that lines up with that hole. Kind of interesting. We look down into that hole. It's just what caused the hole. It's open. We also notice these different sub-levels have the reinforced concrete bars sticking out of it. And this piece of I-beam is pretty fascinating. It looks like it just withered away to nothing. It's eroded to nothing, thinned out. And there's another hole up here. When you start looking at this, you start noticing lots of little holes, and they coalesce into bigger holes. So if we look at all of these grouped together, lift off a few of the wheat checks that are laying over the top of them, we can look down into that hole and climb down into it. We're climbing down into the basement of the second tower, and to me it looks that these folks are walking through a puddle of water. We may have heard of rumors of molten metal, but I see no indication of it here. And this picture was taken a week after 9/11.
Dr. Wood was denying the existence of molten metal at Ground Zero, denying extreme high temperatures in general. Yet the effects of extraordinary heat were all around. We have this fused mass of steel and concrete that's known as the meteorite. We see the mushroom cloud expand rapidly, upwards and outwards against the wind. In fact, the Twin Towers mostly disintegrated into shooting point sources trailing what resembles rocket exhaust. Rocket exhaust looks the way it does because it is expanding in all directions, and that is because it is moving from very high temperature and pressure to much lower temperature and pressure. Spraying whipped cream behaves the same way for the same reason. The contents of the can are under great pressure. When any substance expands outwards in all directions, there is simply no other explanation besides a rapid release of built-up pressure.
And as we get closer to the center of this, it gets hotter and hotter. It's probably 1,500 degrees. We've had some small windows into what we thought was a core at some point, and it looked like an oven. You know, it was just roaring inside. And it's just a bright, bright reddish orange color. See that stuff he's pulling out? What was that, Chief? We're gonna hold off on the water. See the stuff he's pulling out? Yeah. It's red hot.
Another interesting phenomenon is toasted cars. Large number of toasted cars. I don't mean just a few burnout cars. I mean this weird things happening that don't make sense. After Tower 1 was destroyed, that's the second tower that was destroyed, suddenly these cars were on fire. There's mountains of paper in between, large volumes of paper that didn't burn. Why are these cars over here on fire when nothing between the tower and the car is? And after the fire stopped, we noticed the cars are all rusted. Thanks a lot. Then there's cars over on FDR Drive that had another peculiar pattern to them. This door looks like it just wilted, and the frames for the windows flopped over. I don't know what happened to his front tire, but it looks like he still has the steel belting of the tire in it, so he had radial tires. Fires don't cause steel to melt. we have various other interesting patterns. This vehicle was parked a building away on the other side of the post office. What happened to it? If it had debris fall through it, why isn't the roof destroyed? This side's eaten out, wheels eaten. Fire, spontaneous combustion. Here's that toasted lot. Paint is fine here, not here. And don't know what that is. Is it a car, truck? I call it the what's it car. This vehicle is sitting on top of this one. Why is it so rusted? This is the day after 9/11.
Look at these two cars placed on top of one another. I think when you think about the impact that these planes must have had, it's hard to visualize it because everything melted. But here, at least you have some remnants. You have literally an engine that is melded together with other parts of the car. Moving over, you've got another car they moved here. It looks like it's been through a war. You can see the papers, all the burned out papers from the building. You see the soot and the dirt, and it just shows you how devastating this blast was. Look across the street there. You've got a Con Ed truck that, you know, some of the Con Ed people now looking at, examining, trying to figure out which truck that actually was. But that truck too, in terrible shape. So while many of the items, the steel was literally melted.
We see more of these strange phenomena. Cars burning, not paper. Paper in the tree lost its leaves. Paper on the ground, only vehicles burning. That's pretty aggressive burning. Another one lost its engine. Where'd it go? Same here. Engine's gone. So is the cab. And the ladder just kind of wilted down over it. Van with missing door handles. That seemed to be a common theme. A lot of door handles gone. Different kind of material. This is West Broadway. So what happened on that street? Here's a top view of that same street. This aggressive cloud looks like it did something unique. Because all the vehicles along this street were toasted. Maker's Trust across the street had some interesting events occur. This building, according to FEMA, had no fires in it. What happened to this beam? That's not from a mechanical overload. This was a horizontal beam supporting the floors. Why would it shrivel up that way like you would curl a ribbon for a package?
Horizontal structural beams are under great tension. If some extremely hot reacting substance went by and then tension was lost, shriveling up is exactly what would happen. Clearly, something extraordinary destroyed the World Trade Center. But what? According to Dr. Wood, it was some kind of directed energy weapon. Along with co-author Morgan Reynolds, they released the Star Wars beam weapon. Although she does have some curious blind spots, without doubt, Dr. Judy Wood created the most comprehensive study of the visual record.
What if you knew about a complicated crime? One that was beyond the reach of ordinary minds. Would you stand up defending all that's right and good? Well, Judy, 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 Judy Wood. From the mountain, even if you could. Well, Judy, 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 Judy Wood. How is a tower like a tree? What does this mean to you? With billiard balls, Judy Wood. But if your television tortured every trip, what if your story got all twisted and abused? Would you simplify the picture when the world misunderstood? Well, Judy, Judy, Judy.
Is this dangerous?
I think it's just smoke.
There's no danger of other buildings. Is the air conditioner turned off in the room? And the windows closed in the bedroom?
Near the area are in an absolute frenzy situation. The entire top of the building just collapsed.
The entire building just collapsed.
Building just collapsed.
So we know they do have some weapons and devices, directed energy weapons that we don't know about. We didn't know about until this. And there's pictures of them. We have this shoots down things. You add more onto this, you get more power. We don't know how much power is required. These are publicly available images of different types of weaponry they plan to put in orbit, or is it already in orbit? We don't know. What we do know is there used to be 2 towers here, and they aren't there anymore.
Are directed energy weapons the best explanation? Or could nuclear reactions better account for the phenomena?
Like any other nuclear weapon, the Davy Crockett gives off 3 basic effects: heat, blast, and nuclear radiation.
Notice the geometry of this nuclear explosion. A chemical signature of nuclear fusion is tritium, the radioactive isotope of hydrogen. Tritium levels 55 times higher than normal were found in the sewer water below ground zero. Stephen Jones is an expert in nuclear fusion, so we traveled to a 9/11 Truth Conference in Indiana and asked Stephen Jones about that.
Tritium is an interesting character because tritium can come from other sources. And backlights of exit, I'm not saying that's what it was, but it could be just something like that. In other words, it can be a contaminant that arises not from nuclear reactions, but from backlighting. And so, yes, the tritium was high, and that was reported and published, but it is not proof of many nukes.
That's the official story. Supposedly, the 2 airplanes had about 34 curies of tritium in the exit signs. Tritium is a lightweight gas. It's hydrogen. When released, it goes up into the upper atmosphere. To make it down into the water sample, it must first somehow be converted into tritiated water and sprinkled down to the ground into the sewer system, get diluted by 2 heavy rainstorms and 1 million gallons of fire hose water, and still raise the sample up to 55 times the normal background level. In 1965, in Council, Alaska, there was a building fire involving the release of 3,000 curies of tritium, about 100 times more than what was supposedly released by the 9/11 airplanes. Water samples from that incident showed no tritium. None. Nuclear fusion can be initiated with a nuclear fission trigger. Uranium in nuclear fission typically breaks down into 2 rare elements, strontium and barium. the U.S. Geological Survey took samples from around Lower Manhattan. Barium and strontium were both found in the dust, elements that have no business being there at all. Not only were they found, but the concentrations were correlated. In the samples where barium went up, strontium also went up. And the sample with the highest concentration was the only one taken right at ground zero. A nuclear event would also explain this. Ground Zero fumed for over 100 days through rainstorms, freezing temperatures, and constant watering. Judy Wood identifies the effect as ongoing molecular dissociation.
What is this haze? Is it fire? Fire would have a point source. You could see where the fire was coming from, where it would be the strongest. Also, smoke tends to go up. This is just looming over the ground zero remnants. No point source, it's just hanging around there. What is it? This photo was taken at the end of October, Halloween, actually. But what is this white around here? If it were hot, these people would be cooked like on a grill. And it's hydraulics. Wouldn't work. Not only that, they'd permanently destroy their equipment. So they wouldn't have their equipment sitting there if it was going to be destroyed. The people wouldn't be alive if it were hot. What is this white stuff coming out of the ground? And then we notice up above here, you see misting. Why are they misting this? It's not fire. It's not hot. Doesn't seem to be any more where the water is coming from. Water is just being added to this pile. But that's very dense white stuff, whatever it is.
I don't white smoke for 100 days. Sorry, yeah, makes you really wonder.
Dr. Jones is rightly incredulous about the official smoldering fire story.
Actually, some samples of that were taken by Thomas Cahill, UC Davis. I've been in communication with Tom. Thermite, the reaction produces aluminum oxide that comes off as an ash, a very fine powdery ash. But when it came to the question of aluminum oxide, he didn't answer. He wasn't impolite to me, he just simply didn't answer.
A nuclear fission chain reaction, once begun, continues until all the fissionable material is gone. This is the so-called China syndrome, where heavy reacting elements burn downwards through everything. Could that be what caused this? This hole in the bedrock is directly under where the South Tower stood. The workers are filling in the hole with concrete. The surrounding rock appears to have melted and then re-solidified. Janitor Felipe David was working inside the North Tower. His co-worker, Willie Rodriguez, describes skin that was hanging off his body.
Everybody started screaming. and a person comes running into the office saying, explosion, explosion, explosion. He got his hand extended, and all the skin was pulled from his under his arm, all the way to the top of the fingertips, and he was hanging on both arms. Hanging and hanging.
Exactly the same type of horrific radiation effect was described at Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. Inexplicable numbers of ground zero workers are coming down with rare cancers like leukemia and thyroid cancer. According to medical doctor Ed Ward, only radiation can explain this. First responder Matthew Tartaglia.
In January and February of 2002, it became clear that I was very, very sick. I started sweating constantly. I would just walk down the hall and to go to the bathroom or to get something to eat or get a cup of coffee, and I could not breathe.
Tritium, strontium, and barium. Molecular dissociation. The meteorite. The mushroom cloud. The China syndrome. 1,400 melted motor vehicles. Rare cancers. Are we really supposed to believe that airplane crashes caused all that?
It looks like the aftermath of a huge atom bomb or something. Just
by the absolute disintegration of one of those twin trade towers.
In March of 2007, I was writing an article for Morgan Reynolds' website asking libertarians to contemplate 9/11 truth as an opportunity to convince large numbers of people that big government is harmful. In a first draft, I gave evidence for demolition and mentioned something about the plane crashes.
What planes? Yeah, prove it up. We have an official plane story that's physically impossible. It defies basic Newtonian physics. And when people come to me about eyewitnesses, which eyewitness? Name one. Oh, thousands. And here a small group of us, Andrew Johnson being most important over in England, have gone through the FDNY and EMT accounts, and we're down, by the time you get down to, I saw a plane, I heard it, and it crashed into the South Tower, you got one person.
Reynolds persuaded me to reconsider the official airplane theory. I realized then that I had not actually studied the evidence on planes for myself. I had simply taken the word of Jim Hoffman,
collision of Flight 175 with the South Tower,
and Stephen Jones.
Of course, the towers were hit by planes.
Where is the plane debris? Where is the debris below the impact zone? It's not there. Where is the aircraft debris in the gashes? You can see into that building 20 feet anyway. There's not one aircraft part identifiable. You can go to airdisaster.com and look at what plane crashes are really like. A Boeing 767 has 3.1 million parts. Where are all the parts? Where are the contents of the plane? The videos that allegedly show the penetration of the South Tower doesn't show a collision or a crash. There's no collision. What there is a glide in, an absorption, a disappearance of the plane image. Going, well, this is impossible. We know this. 6-year-olds know about this. This is not where there was no crash. There was no collision according to these videos.
Ignoring the explosions coming from within the tower, all of the United 175 crash videos look quite like this recreation using Google Earth. The aluminum airplane disappeared completely into the steel and concrete tower without bending, breaking, twisting, or slowing down. Not one piece of shattered airplane debris is seen. According to Newton's third law of motion, when one object collides with another, each receives an equal force in opposite directions. It doesn't matter which one is moving and which is holding still. Suppose we turn the problem around. If an airplane was suspended in midair and struck at over 500 miles per hour by a skyscraper, can we really believe that the airplane would go completely inside? Or would the result be something more like this, shattering the much weaker airplane and sending at least some of the material in the direction the building was moving? If this is a better representation for what happens when a tower hits a jet airplane, then the exact same would hold true when a jet airplane hits a tower. And there is another problem with the physics. Behind the wing of any flying airplane, there is a strong rotating vortex of air, like a sideways tornado. It's called wake vortex, and it is persistent, lasting for a minute or more. Of course, wake vortex is ordinarily invisible, unless there happens to be smoke in the air, or a giant fireball. The flame and smoke are forced to curl around the wingtip vortices. Now look at 9/11. We see no evidence that an airplane just flew through this airspace. We should see something like this. The official airplane videos look fake. We don't see any part of the airplane breaking, bending, buckling, twisting, or slowing down. It's unphysical. Ignoring the airplanes, the official 9/11 videos looked like this. They make much more sense with the airplane removed. We see a tower exploding. The wall doesn't break inwards, it explodes outwards. This was my epiphany. The 9/11 airplane videos surely must have been faked using animated airplanes. My simple 3D shatter effect, while it does correctly represent that some aircraft parts would rebound, is hardly realistic. But couldn't the compositrators have made more realistic airplane animations with shattered pieces falling to the ground? Well, actually, no. There are 3 insurmountable problems with that. 1. Time. Imagine trying to model something like this. Animating a shattering, exploding airplane is nearly impossible, while disappearing an airplane is easy. They needed to show the airplane videos quickly. 2. Penetration. They needed us to believe the planes went completely inside the towers so that we could believe there was massive damage to the central core. 3. Debris. The falling debris would include seats and luggage and people. Thousands of matching items would have to be planted on the streets. It's impossible. A simulation was created that purported to show how airplanes could go completely inside a tower. Engineers and computer scientists at Purdue University created this animation of the plane crashing into the North Tower.
All the animated geometry seen here was created automatically from the simulation output data.
The visualization is supposedly created entirely from a structural engineering simulation. Yet we observe ridiculous impossibilities, such as this aluminum fuselage piece slicing right through a steel and concrete floor, and then the floor assembly coming right back together in one piece. We went to the computer science department at Purdue and spoke to Wojciech Popescu. This piece right here, it comes right through that floor, but then the floor heals up.
Heals up?
Doesn't it?
No, I don't think so.
Well, go forward. I think it's the same section on there. I guess it's a little bit later. That's a different edit. That's a different edit than I have.
Well, we added credits and we made a slightly longer version at some point. I don't know whether this is a longer or shorter version than what you have, but anyway.
Could it be that you took that part out?
Paul edited the video, but what exact part are you talking about?
Here's the part I'm talking about on the version I have.
Let's talk about this now.
This large gray piece of aluminum right here just appears to be cutting right through this floor assembly here, you see? Turn it toward you. See that?
Right.
It's coming right through. Up, right on through. And then, after it passes by,
well,
floor assemblies don't back together again. I don't understand that.
I don't know where that, what exactly that is or what it is due to.
Okay. On 9/11, American Airlines Flight 11 appeared to enter the north face of the tower, while the exit wound was on the east face, as if the airplane debris took a left turn inside the building. The Purdue animation shows the exit wound from the opposite, or south face. Once again, this part of the animation was missing from the version Mr. Popescu presented.
The civil engineering part of the team should really address this.
So, the next morning, we went to visit Meta Sozin, head of structural engineering at Purdue and leader of the civil engineering team that conducted the simulation. Now, was there any reality checking that went on, or what's your take on why your simulation has the stuff coming out the south face, and in reality we saw the stuff coming out the east face?
Yeah, you know, that's very much like the old Von Braun joke, where he said, "I shoot them up, I don't care where they come down."
What? Sozin is doing comedy? Should I add a laugh track?
I shoot them up, I don't care where they come down.
You want to see something I think is funny?
Don't tell anybody.
6. Attention Walmart shoppers, 9/11 was an inside job. Google World Trade Center 7. It came down in 6.5 seconds. Thank you.
But you see, we came to Purdue looking for serious answers, and I don't think we got any. Meta Sozin also studied the events at the Pentagon. This is the so-called C-ring exit hole. Because it's so perfectly round, a lot of people think it must have been created by a shaped explosive charge. No engine or fuselage or much of anything was found in the area beyond.
What a perfect circle, isn't it? Yes. Well, look, anybody who playing baseball or cricket as a kid knows that when he or she breaks a window, it leaves a round hole. The question is, there was no airplane, say with respect to the Pentagon? Now, I cannot blame them, because they say, where are the pieces of the airplane? Where are they? Nobody has seen them. Well, not nobody. The people who worked on the Pentagon immediately after the event, because I went there later, tell me that our government very carefully picked up all the pieces and put them in storage. That's what I'm told.
That may be what Professor Sozin was told, but to this day, the FBI investigations have failed to produce a single serial number part from a single 9/11 airplane. Not one.
The only other thing that was found was the engine on Murray Street, and the engine on Murray Street has been identified as either a CFM56 or the CF6, but whichever one it was, the CF6 or the CFM56, it had to be General Electric. And unfortunately, or fortunately, United Airlines used strictly Pratt & Whitney. So that engine that you see flying off, and that engine they say is from 175, isn't from 175, because the guy's whose job was to dump it off there, you know, in a smoking, smoldering thing, dumped off the wrong engine.
In the summer of 2007, I began taking measurements of the airplane motion and the camera motion in the Chopper 5 video. To understand how looking at airplane and camera motion can help us spot a fake, let's consider this control case. This is a real-time composite video I made using an Avid system. One of the two planes was really in the shot. The other one was added. which is which. We can track the motion of the airplane frame by frame. First, the Alaskan jet. We can see that the motion appears nice and smooth. Next, the Frontier jet is tracked. Its motion appears more jittery. Does this mean the Frontier jet is the fake? Well, not so fast. We must consider camera motion. The shot is a little shaky. Here, I've stabilized the footage, holding the building and the antenna motionless, removing the camera motion. Now, it's the Alaskan jet that appears jittery, while the Frontier jet is smooth. Stabilizing the footage made the motion of the Alaskan jet more jittery. This allows us to identify it as the fake. I did the same with the Chopper 5 footage, measuring the motion of the airplane before and after stabilizing the footage. As we can see, the motion of the plane becomes more jittery after stabilizing the footage. This is impossible with a real plane, but is exactly the kind of problem you will encounter in trying to composite a smooth jet into unstable helicopter footage. So I'm highly suspicious that the 9/11 airplane videos are fake. I don't think a real airplane could possibly behave like what we see in the videos or in the Purdue animations. I don't think the Purdue animations are based on any engineering at all. So I asked about Professor Sozin's data. If someone were to want to duplicate your results, are those data available, or can you make them available? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a cheesy answer. I can't duplicate my own results, however, because they're sensitive. Sure, they're available, and sure, they're available, sure, they're available. And
repeated emails and phone calls to the Purdue scientists requesting the simulation data and requesting a high-quality, unedited copy of the animation have been ignored.
Reality got blown to kingdom come. The media captains of an airplane through the steel. They read their lines, they hid the crimes, held up their end of the deal. Propaganda from your government designed to frighten you. Manufacturing reality and tightening the screws. So hard you cry out from the pain. You give in to the game. You abandon all your reason. Start believing in fake planes. Well, I deny your early footage. Laying down to the voice sound and a witness bed. I deny your sacred scripture. And I'll go on disbelieving till I'm dead.
Well, that's the statement of a musician.
Jared Holmgren has given a very powerful theoretical argument as to why they would never use real planes. Remember, the story is going to be that the suicidal hijackers crashed planes into the towers, causing massive structural damage and starting super hot fires. Later, the buildings collapse from the exact places the airplanes crashed. Any scenario involving suicidal hijackers is out. No human could be depended on to actually go through with it. Planes can be flown by remote control. But you wouldn't electronically hijack the real passenger flights, because as soon as you did, the pilots and crew would be on the radio saying, "Help, we've been electronically hijacked." Even if you could disable the radio, as the plane gets to low altitude, cell phones begin to work. Just one brief message would expose the plot. The real planes could be swapped with imposter drone planes, but you need to target the crashes with pinpoint accuracy. If the building demolition begins even one story below where the plane hit, this would be very difficult to call a collapse. It's doubtful that a clumsy Boeing 767 could be targeted with that degree of accuracy. And you need the plane to appear to completely penetrate the building so that people can imagine massive structural damage to the building core. Parts of a real airplane would break off and fall to the ground. Parts have serial numbers. Even one serial number part being found by the wrong person would be a very messy problem. Real planes leave real evidence. And don't forget, this event needs to be on live television. How do you do it? You do it by planting explosives in the building and inserting a fake airplane into the video. On August 18, 2001, the New York Times reported on a group of performance artists who had taken over an entire floor high in the North Tower. They were called Gelatin, and their art was called The Bee Thing. They had put up a maze of cardboard so that visitors could not see what they were up to. They left behind sketches that showed the exact number and location of core and perimeter columns, with lines that appear to show the direction of something entering the tower from outside. They removed windows and built a balcony. And this just happened to be at exactly the level where American Airlines Flight 11 would appear to hit just 3 weeks after the Times article ran. Performance art? Since when do performance artists even have the money to rent an entire floor of the North Tower for a year? Nonsense. Gelatin were explosives experts installing a fake airplane crash. And they weren't the only suspicious occupants. A fireproofing upgrade took place on the Twin Towers from 1999 to 2000. And look at which floors were upgraded. They correlate quite precisely with where the airplane supposedly went in. This would have given workers direct access to the structural steel. While much of the perimeter material on both towers appears to have exploded outwards, a few columns on the North Tower appear to have been bent inwards. How could they have done that? By removing floor trusses. Taking out the floor supports would make the floors sag, creating a strong inward pull between the perimeter and core. But can they really put a fake plane in news video?